New digital scan of the Titanic has offered an unprecedented insight into the ship's final moments.
Focus of all those documentaries and Hollywood movies. But there's one version of Titanic we have never seen until this morning.
For a century, the Titanic has been hidden in darkness.
For over a century, we thought we knew everything about the Titanic. Every documentary, every museum exhibit, every midnight conversation about history's most famous disaster, all of it based on assumptions, blurry photographs, and survivor memories fading with time. But on a cold morning in 2026, everything changed. Not because someone found a new artifact, not because a diary surfaced, but because scientists did something nobody thought possible. They brought the Titanic back to life, digitally, completely. And what they found in those 3,800 meters of darkness doesn't just challenge what we knew, it shatters it entirely.
A full-size digital scan of the Titanic has revealed crucial information about the ship's final moment.
If you thought the Titanic's story was finished, you're about to discover you were wrong, dead wrong. The mission that changed everything. The North Atlantic is not a forgiving place. At nearly 4,000 meters below the surface, the pressure is crushing, literally, over 5,600 pounds per square inch, enough to flatten a car into a pancake. The temperature hovers just above freezing. There's no light, no sound except the occasional groan of shifting metal. And somewhere in that black void lies the graveyard of the unsinkable. For decades, exploring the Titanic meant sending down cameras attached to submersibles, hoping to catch glimpses through murky water, praying equipment wouldn't fail. The images we got were grainy, incomplete, fragmented, like trying to understand a cathedral by looking through a keyhole. We saw pieces, never the whole picture, until now. In 2026, a joint expedition launched by Atlantic Productions, National Geographic, and deep-sea engineering specialists deployed something revolutionary. Not diverse, not a single submersible, but a fleet of cutting-edge robotic vehicles, each equipped with the most advanced photogrammetry systems ever created. Their mission was audacious, maybe even crazy. Map every single inch of the Titanic wreck site, every rivet, every broken railing, every scattered shoe. The technology, mind-blowing. Multiple submersibles working in synchronized patterns, crisscrossing the debris field in precise grids. High-resolution cameras capturing images from every conceivable angle. Laser measuring systems recording exact distances down to the millimeter. All of it coordinated by artificial intelligence that could stitch together millions of photographs into a single seamless three-dimensional model. For 6 weeks, the submersibles worked around the clock. Down in the darkness, up to the surface for data transfer, then back down again. Over and over. The team captured more than 700,000 individual images. Think about that number. 700,000 photographs.
It's incredibly challenging to work at Titanic.
Each one crystal clear. Each one a piece of a puzzle that had waited over a century to be solved. The data alone was staggering. 16 terabytes. That's the equivalent of thousands of feature-length movies. But this wasn't entertainment. This was resurrection. When the engineers finally compiled everything into a complete digital twin, even the most hardened veterans of deep-sea exploration stood in stunned silence. For the first time in human history, you could see the Titanic exactly as it exists today. Not in fragments, not in imagination, but whole, complete, and not frozen in its final resting place, with a clarity that made it feel like you could reach out and touch the cold steel. It was like time travel, one engineer whispered, staring at the first full rendering. We went back to April 15th, 1912, and we never left. The bow in the stern, a tale of two ships. When the first complete images loaded on the screens, the research team saw something that sent chills down their spines. The Titanic, even in death, told two completely different stories. The bow sits upright, almost regal, buried deep in the ocean floor. It's pointing northwest toward New York, toward the destination it never reached. The railings are bent but recognizable. Portholes gape like empty eye sockets. The massive anchor chains still coil near the front, as if waiting for orders that will never come. There's something haunting about its dignity. Even crushed by pressure and eaten by rust, the bow maintains a ghostly nobility. It looks like it's still trying to sail. Travel 600 meters across the seabed, and you enter a different world entirely. The stern is carnage. Pure, unadulterated destruction. It's not sitting upright. It's not intact. It's a twisted, mangled skeleton of what was once the mighty heart of the ship. Decks collapsed onto decks like a telescoped building after an earthquake. Boilers torn from their moorings and flung across the ocean floor. Engine parts scattered like toys thrown by an angry child. The metal itself is curled, folded, ripped apart with such violence that it's hard to believe these two sections came from the same vessel. Between them stretches a debris corridor, a breadcrumb trail of tragedy. Over 5,000 artifacts spread across nearly 600 meters of ocean floor. Chandeliers, bathtubs, coal bins, pieces of the grand staircase, a child's doll, a man's shoe, a steamer trunk with luggage still inside. Each object a story, each position a clue. The digital scan captured it all with such precision that researchers could zoom in on individual items and read faded labels. They could count the teeth on a gear. They could see scorch marks on wiring. They could trace exactly where each piece landed, giving forensic investigators a timeline of disaster more accurate than any survivor testimony ever could. But here's what nobody expected. The scan revealed that everything we thought we knew about how the ship broke apart was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. The break, not what you think, in every movie, every documentary, every artistic recreation, the Titanic splits in half with dramatic finality. The ship tilts upward at a steep angle, there's a thunderous crack and snap. It breaks cleanly in two. The bow plunges downward, the stern crashes back into the water, and both sections sink separately into the abyss. It's dramatic, it's cinematic, it's memorable. It's also not what happened. The new scan reveals something far more horrifying, far more drawn out, and far more violent than anyone imagined. The breakup wasn't a single event, it was a sequence. A brutal, slow-motion unraveling that took nearly a minute. An eternity when you're clinging to a sinking ship in the middle of the North Atlantic. Look closely at the stern in the digital model. The metal plating around the breakpoint isn't just separated. It's twisted, folded, compressed like aluminum foil in a giant's fist. Steel beams that were designed to support thousands of tons are bent into spirals. Deck plates that should be flat are folded in on themselves at impossible angles. This kind of damage doesn't happen from a clean break. It happens from torsion, twisting, the bow pulling one direction, the stern rotating another, and the entire middle section of the ship caught between two opposing forces so powerful that the steel itself couldn't resist. Marine forensic experts analyzing the scan describe it as a progressive structural failure. As the bow sank deeper and the stern lifted higher out of the water, the ship's central spine, the keel, began to twist, not bend, twist, like wringing out a towel. The strain built gradually, moving from the keel upward through the hull. Bulkheads buckled. The support beams sheared. Deck after deck began to separate, not all at once, but one failure leading to the next, creating a cascading collapse. And here's the truly chilling part. The scan shows evidence that this twisting breakup happened while people were still inside. In the collapsed stern section, researchers found bunks still tangled together, luggage trapped in what used to be corridors, staircases frozen at the moment they tore apart. These weren't empty spaces. These were crew quarters. These were working areas. These were places where men were still fighting to save the ship when the structure around them disintegrated. The stern's final descent was equally violent. As it twisted free from the bow, air pockets trapped in the aft compartments turned the entire rear section into a spinning, chaotic mass. It didn't fall straight down. It corkscrewed, rotating as it plunged, which explains why it hit the ocean floor with such devastating force. The impact was so severe that entire sections vaporized, turned into fragments so small they disappeared into the sediment. That's why the stern looks like it exploded while the bow remains relatively intact. Two different descents, two different fates. One section sank with almost graceful resignation. The other was torn apart by physics and fury. Survivor accounts suddenly make perfect sense. Multiple witnesses described hearing not one crack, but a series of sounds, groaning, screeching, thunderous booms that went on and on. They weren't exaggerating. They were hearing exactly what the scan now proves, the sequential destruction of a ship being pulled apart by its own weight. The unsung heroes, those who kept the lights on. But if the structural failure is the skeleton of Titanic's story, the human element is its beating heart. And nowhere is that more evident than in what the scan revealed about the ship's engineering crew. Deep in the digital model, in spaces that have been dark for over a century, researchers found something that changed everything. In boiler room number 2, the metal grates that once held burning coal are bent inward, concave, deformed by heat and pressure. To understand what this means, you need to know how these boilers worked. The Titanic was powered by 29 massive boilers, each containing multiple furnaces, burning coal at temperatures that could blister skin from 6 feet away. The boilers produced steam that drove the engines, and, critically, they powered the electrical generators that kept the ship's lights on. When water began flooding the lower decks, standard procedure would have been to shut down the boilers immediately. Leaving them running while water poured in would be not just dangerous, it would be suicidal. But the grates are bent inward. That only happens if pressure continued building even as the compartment flooded, which means someone kept stoking those fires. Someone kept those boilers running long after they should have been abandoned. The scan found more. A manual steam valve, located on a section of the stern's infrastructure, locked in the open position. This valve controlled the flow of steam to the ship's electrical dynamos. Keeping it open would maintain power throughout the ship. Closing it would plunge everything into darkness immediately. It's open. Not deliberately, manually overridden. Forensic electrical engineers studying the three-dimensional model found additional evidence. Scorched wiring near the forward power stations, burn marks in specific patterns that indicate intentional rerouting of electrical current through backup circuits. This isn't random fire damage. This is someone, or multiple someones, working frantically to keep the power grid alive as water rose around their knees. Think about what this means in human terms. More than 30 men stayed below decks in those final hours. Engineers, firemen, trimmers, electricians. They knew the ship was sinking. They knew there weren't enough lifeboats. They knew that staying in the boiler rooms and engine spaces meant certain death. And they stayed anyway. Why? Because every extra minute the lights stayed on meant another lifeboat could be launched. Every additional moment of electrical power meant the pumps could keep fighting the flood, buying time. Every second of illumination on the upper decks meant passengers could see where they were going, instead of panicking in total darkness. The numbers are stark. Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m. The lights stayed on until approximately 2:17 a.m., just 3 minutes before the final plunge. Survivors universally recalled that the lights flickered but never fully failed until the very end. That's not automatic systems. That's not backup batteries. That's human beings choosing to die so others might live. Lawrence Beasley, a survivor, wrote in his account, "The lights were steady and reassuring. They gave us courage. And only later did I realize that someone had to pay for that calm with their lives." He didn't know how right he was. Those lights were purchased with the blood of men whose names appeared nowhere in the glittering passenger manifests, whose sacrifice was barely noted in official inquiries, whose heroism was buried beneath stories of millionaires and tragic romance. Until now. The digital scan has vindicated them. The evidence is irrefutable, encoded in twisted metal and warped valves. These men made a conscious choice. They stood at their posts while water climbed from their ankles to their knees to their waists. They kept the generators running while the ship groaned and buckled around them. They bought time not for themselves, but for people they would never meet. One researcher, examining the scan of the collapsed engine rooms, he put it simply, this isn't just about a shipwreck anymore. It's about the highest form of courage, dying so strangers might live. And we're only now reading their testament written in iron and steam. The iceberg didn't gash. It sliced for decades. The popular image of Titanic's fatal damage was simple. A massive iceberg tore a huge gash down the side of the hull and water poured in. Artists painted it. Movies showed it. Museum displays recreated it. One single catastrophic wound that doomed the unsinkable ship. The scan tells a different story, a more terrifying one. There is no gash, no massive tear, no gaping wound. Instead, the three-dimensional model reveals something far more insidious. A series of thin slits and separated seams running along nearly 300 feet of the starboard side. One individual openings no wider than a few millimeters in most places. Some barely the width of a human hair where rivets popped and steel plates separated at their joints. The iceberg didn't punch through the hull. It acted like a surgical knife, sliding along the side of the ship, using Titanic's own forward momentum to peel open seam after seam. Like unzipping a jacket, like opening a letter. Precise, methodical, deadly. This explains one of the great mysteries of the Titanic, why it sank so slowly, yet so inevitably. Water didn't rush in through one massive hole. It seeped, it trickled, it infiltrated, one compartment at a time, climbing over watertight bulkheads that weren't designed to be overtopped. The ship wasn't violently breached, it was quietly bleeding to death. A naval architect reviewing the scan calculated the total area of the breaches. The result was shocking. Approximately 12 square feet. 12 square feet of openings across 6 compartments. That's roughly the size of a small coffee table. That tiny amount of open hull area was enough to sink the largest moving object ever built by human hands. Titanic was designed to survive flooding in 4 compartments. The damage extended to 6. That was the difference. That was the margin. 2 extra compartments. 24 extra inches of separation from survival. The simulation models show exactly how it unfolded. Water entered compartment 1, then 2, then 3. As the bows settled lower, water climbed the interior bulkheads, walls that extended upward but didn't reach the ceiling. Once the water level rose above the bulkhead height in the forward compartments, it spilled over like a bathtub overflowing, cascading into the next compartment, and the next in a domino effect that nothing could stop. The physics were merciless. As more compartments flooded, the bow sank deeper, creating a steeper angle that accelerated the overflow. And the whole time, that tiny 12 square feet of openings kept feeding more water into the system, like a slow poison working through the ship's veins. People always ask how something so massive could sink, says Dr. Helen Faber, a marine architect who worked on the analysis. But the Titanic didn't fail because it was weak. It failed because the damage was perfectly positioned, a few feet in any direction, and we might be talking about it as a near miss instead of history's greatest maritime disaster. The scan also reveals something else: how close Titanic came to surviving. If the iceberg had struck at a slightly different angle, or if the ship had turned just a few seconds earlier, the breaches might have been limited to 4 compartments. The watertight system would have held. The ship would have stayed afloat long enough for rescue. Over 1,500 people would have lived. The difference between life and death, between tragedy and triumph, was measured in inches and seconds. That's the real horror the scan reveals. This wasn't inevitable cosmic fate. This was a razor-thin margin, a paper-thin catastrophe. The Titanic didn't die from overwhelming force. It died from 1,000 tiny cuts that happened to fall in exactly the wrong places. At the debris field, a museum of last moments, between the bow and stern sections, lies what researchers call the corridor of tragedy, a debris field spanning over half a mile, containing more than 5,000 individual objects. Before the 2025 scan, much of this area was documented only through limited submersible passes, brief glimpses that could never capture the full scope. Now, for the first time, every single item has been mapped, measured, and cataloged. What they found isn't just archaeological, it's personal, intimate, heartbreaking. The scan shows pairs of shoes sitting together on the ocean floor, their leather long since consumed, but their position unchanged. These aren't random. They mark where bodies came to rest, preserved by the cold and pressure until the soft tissue decomposed, leaving only the leather and the metal eyelets. Each pair of shoes is a person, a life, a story that ended in those freezing waters. Near the officers' quarters, the scan picked up a battered metal locker, its door twisted but still partially attached. Inside, researchers believe they've identified what appears to be a tin container with paper fragments. Early analysis suggests it could be a logbook entry or personal notes, possibly written as the ship listed. The words are barely legible, but references to lights dimming and men at posts have been partially reconstructed. If verified, this would be one of the only physical documents from the final moments. Scattered throughout the debris field are remnants of lives interrupted. A steamer trunk, still intact, its contents preserved by the anaerobic conditions. Children's toys, a porcelain doll, a mechanical toy car, a ball, a pocket watch stopped at 2:20 a.m., the exact moment the stern disappeared beneath the waves. Jewelry, perfume bottles, eyeglasses, a handwritten postcard that was never mailed. Each object tells a story, but together they reveal something even more profound. How quickly normalcy turned to chaos. How people grabbed what they thought was important in their final moments. How the random physics of sinking sorted these precious items across the ocean floor. The scan shows where first-class luggage landed alongside coal shovels from the boiler rooms. A grand staircase balustrade rests next to a simple crew member's cap. In death, the rigid class structure of Titanic disappeared. Everyone ended up in the same grave, their possessions mixed together in democratic disarray. But perhaps the most haunting discovery is what's not there. The scan shows empty spaces, voids in the debris field where objects should be, but aren't. Researchers believe these gaps represent items that disintegrated completely under the pressure of the descent, or personal belongings that were swept away by underwater currents over the decades. Each empty space is a story lost forever, a memory that even the ocean couldn't preserve. One artifact in particular has captured worldwide attention. A piece of ornate metalwork from the Marconi radio room, the wireless station where operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride sent distress signals until the very end. The scan shows the room's skeletal structure still relatively intact, buried in the collapsed forward superstructure. Equipment racks are visible, and though the instruments themselves have corroded away, but the layout matches exactly what survivors described. A small, cramped space where two men worked frantically to call for help while water climbed the corridors outside. Phillips died that night. Bride survived but suffered severe injuries. The scan of their workplace, preserved in the digital model, has become an accidental memorial to their final act of duty. Every time we zoom into another section of the debris field, says one archaeologist working on the project, we find something that makes us pause. A toy, a tool, a piece of machinery. And we have to remember, this isn't just wreckage. This is a cemetery, the largest maritime cemetery in the world. And we're walking through it with cameras. The Marconi Room, where hope died. Last, the radio room, officially called the Marconi Room after the wireless telegraph company that operated it, was Titanic's lifeline to the outside world. Located on the boat deck, between the grand staircase and the bridge, it was a small space crammed with cutting-edge technology. Two operators worked in shifts, sending messages for passengers, receiving news and updates, and monitoring the wireless frequencies for important communications. On the night of April 14th, that room became the most important space on the ship. The scan's revelation about the Marconi Room is bittersweet. The structure still stands, at least partially. The walls, though collapsed and corroded, maintain their basic shape. Equipment racks are recognizable. The position of chairs and workstations can be determined. Most remarkably, tangles of electrical wiring, or what remains of them, still cling to the walls, frozen in place by rust and sediment. But what makes this discovery so powerful isn't the technology, it's what the room represents. After the collision, first wireless operator Jack Phillips and his assistant Harold Bride began sending distress signals. At first, they used the standard CQD distress call. Later, they switched to the new SOS signal. The messages went out again and again, growing more desperate as the situation deteriorated. CQD, CQD, SOS, SOS. We are sinking fast. Passengers being put into boats. The scan shows that the Marconi Room maintained power almost until the very end. Confirmation of the engineering crew's heroic efforts in the boiler rooms below. Survivor accounts mention seeing lights in the radio room burning bright, even as the ship's angle became more severe. Bride himself, who survived, recalled working alongside Phillips while water climbed the stairs outside, the building listing so badly they had to hold on to their desks. Phillips sent his last confirmed message at approximately 2:17 a.m. Come as quickly as possible. Engine room filling up to the boilers. Minutes later, the power failed. The lights went out. Phillips released Bride from duty, telling him to save himself. Bride escaped. Phillips did not. His body was never recovered. The scan of the Marconi Room, damaged but intact, has sparked intense ethical debates. Some historians want to mount a recovery mission to retrieve any remaining equipment or documents. The room's contents could include message logs, equipment specifications, or personal items belonging to Phillips and Bride. These would be invaluable historical artifacts. But others argue that the Marconi Room is a grave. Phillips died performing his duty. Disturbing the space would be desecrating his final workplace, his final moments, his final act of courage. The room should remain untouched, a memorial visible only through the lens of the digital scan. We can see it now, says one researcher involved in the ethical review. We can study it, we can learn from it. That should be enough. Some places are sacred not because of what they contain, but because of what happened there. The Marconi Room is one of those places. The debate continues. But what's not debatable is this. The scan has given us a window into one of the most crucial locations on the Titanic, a room where hope persisted until the absolute last moment, where two men typed messages into the void and prayed someone would hear them in time. Someone did hear. RMS Carpathia responded to the distress calls and arrived hours later to rescue the survivors floating in lifeboats. But for the 1,500 people who went down with the ship, the Marconi Room's efforts came too late. Still, Jack Phillips kept typing, kept sending, kept hoping, until the lights went out and the cold Atlantic silenced the radio forever. The scan preserves his workspace, and in doing so, preserves his memory. What the scan means for the future. The 2025 digital twin of Titanic represents more than just historical documentation. It's a revolution in how we study, preserve, and understand underwater archaeological sites. And the implications extend far beyond one famous shipwreck. For decades, exploring the Titanic meant physically visiting the site, a process that, ironically, was slowly destroying the very thing it sought to study. Every submersible that landed on the deck crushed metal beneath it. Every robotic arm that moved debris disturbed the site. Tourism expeditions, while bringing public attention, also brought contamination and damage. Metal-eating bacteria, possibly introduced by these visits, have been consuming the wreck at an accelerating rate. Recent estimates suggest the Titanic could collapse entirely within the next few decades. The digital twin changes this equation completely. Now, researchers can explore the entire site without ever touching it. They can zoom into details invisible to the human eye. They can measure, analyze, and simulate without disturbing a single rivet. And perhaps most importantly, they've created a permanent record, a snapshot frozen in time that will exist even after the physical wreck disintegrates into rust and sediment. What we've created is essentially a time capsule, explains one of the project's lead scientists. 50 years from now, when the Titanic is gone, people will still be able to study this scan and see exactly what we saw in 2025. It's archaeological preservation on a scale that was impossible before. The technology is already being applied to other historic wrecks. Plans are underway to create digital twins of the Endurance, Ernest Shackleton's ship that was crushed by Antarctic ice and recently discovered. World War II wrecks scattered across the Pacific are being mapped with the same techniques. Even submerged ancient cities in the Mediterranean are candidates for this technology. But beyond preservation, the scan has opened new investigative possibilities. Artificial intelligence is being trained on the 16 terabytes of Titanic data, learning to identify patterns invisible to human researchers. These AI systems can analyze metal fatigue patterns, track debris dispersal, and even reconstruct the timeline of the sinking with unprecedented precision. One AI analysis suggests it can now determine within a few minutes when specific sections of the ship broke apart based on how debris landed. Another program has mapped probable crew movements during the evacuation, showing which corridors were used most frequently, where bottlenecks occurred, and which escape routes remained open longest. We're not just looking at history anymore, says a computer scientist working on the AI project. We're interrogating it. We're asking questions the wreck can finally answer. Perhaps most significantly, the scan has humanized the Titanic in ways that previous explorations never could. By revealing the evidence of the engineering crew's sacrifice, by showing the personal items scattered across the debris field, by preserving the Marconi room where men type messages with their last breaths, the scan has transformed Titanic from a symbol into a story. Not about hubris or fate, but about human beings facing impossible choices and, in many cases, choosing courage over survival. The mysteries that remain. Despite everything the 2025 scan revealed, Titanic still keeps secrets. Some questions may never be answered, but others have simply become more intriguing in light of the new data. Where are the missing midsection pieces? The scan shows gaps in the debris field, areas where significant portions of the ship's central structure should be but aren't. Did these sections disintegrate completely? Are they buried so deeply in sediment that even the most advanced scanning can't detect them? If found, they could reveal the exact sequence of the break, potentially settling some debates once and for all. What happened to the Titanic's safe? Passengers and crew reported that the ship carried a significant amount of valuables in its safe, including jewelry, cash, and important documents. The safe's location in the ship is known, but the scan hasn't definitively identified it yet. Is it still intact somewhere in the collapsed structure? Or did it burst open during the sinking, scattering its contents across the ocean floor? Why did the stern section suffer such catastrophic damage compared to the bow? While we now understand the rotational dynamics during the descent, the sheer violence of the stern's destruction still puzzles engineers. Some believe there's a missing variable, perhaps an implosion, an air pocket explosion, or a structural failure we haven't identified yet. The answer could reshape our understanding of how ships break apart under extreme pressure. How many people were still inside the ship when it went down? Survivor accounts vary wildly. Some say hundreds remained aboard. Others suggest most had evacuated. The scan can't tell us directly, but by analyzing the distribution of personal items and the condition of interior spaces, my researchers hope to develop better estimates. It's a grim calculation, but an important one for understanding the full scope of the tragedy. And perhaps most tantalizingly, what will the next scan reveal? Technology advances rapidly. Already, plans are being discussed for a follow-up mission using even more sophisticated equipment, potentially including ground-penetrating sonar that could see inside the hull, or chemical sensors that could detect organic materials invisible to cameras. Each new technological leap offers the possibility of answering questions we don't even know to ask yet. The Titanic has been down there for 113 years, reflects one researcher. It's waited this long to tell its full story. I don't think it's finished talking yet. On April 15th, 1912, the RMS Titanic disappeared beneath the North Atlantic, taking 1,500 souls with it. For over a century, we've tried to understand what happened in those 2 hours and 40 minutes between collision and sinking. We've interviewed survivors, analyzed the ship's design, conducted official inquiries, created countless documentaries, and written endless books. But only now in 2025 are we finally seeing what really happened. Not through faded memories or artistic interpretation, but through cold, precise digital evidence. The scan doesn't just show us a shipwreck, it shows us choices, sacrifice, courage, physics, human error, split-second decisions that rippled across history. It shows us engineers who chose to die in boiler rooms so passengers above could see where they were going. It shows us wireless operators who stayed at their posts, typing messages until the very last moment. It shows us a ship that didn't fail catastrophically, but bled slowly through paper-thin cuts. It shows us a break that wasn't clean, but brutal, drawn out, and terrifying. Most importantly, it shows us that history isn't fixed. It's not settled. Every generation gets to ask new questions, and if we're lucky, the past provides new answers. The Titanic story is still being written, one scan at a time, one discovery at a time, one revelation at a time. And the ocean, patient and cold, still has more to reveal. We just have to keep looking. What discovery shocked you the most? Do you think there are still major mysteries waiting to be solved? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this journey into history as fascinating as we did, hit that like button, subscribe, and join us next time as we continue to explore the secrets hidden in the deep. Because the truth is down there, 3,800 meters below the surface, waiting in the darkness, and we're just getting started.